This game, I don't know if it's cursed or just straight up mismanaged, but somehow it's in another nightmare scenario. And this might be the worst yet. So what happened? Well, the entire game leaked. Not just a couple of screenshots or some early gameplay footage, the whole thing. Physical copies are out there being sold on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, even street vendors in some countries. People have the game weeks before launch and they're playing it right now. It's crazy. So how does something like this even happen? Well, remember AC Shadows was originally set to launch on February 14th. Then Ubisoft randomly delayed it to March 20th. But from what I've heard, a bunch of developers didn't even know about the delay until they saw the announcement on social media, which tells you how last minute this decision probably was. And if the delay was that sudden, there's a good chance Ubisoft didn't notify all their distribution centers in time. So what does that mean? It means a bunch of physical copies were already printed, packaged, and shipped out for that original February 14th release. And once they reached warehouses, some of them just disappeared. Maybe they were stolen. Maybe someone working in distribution figured they could make a quick buck. Either way, they ended up in the hands of people who are now flipping them online. The community reaction to the Assassin's Creed Shadows leak? It's a mix of frustration, mockery, and outright disbelief. Ubisoft is getting roasted from all sides, not just for the leak itself, but for what it says about their ongoing struggles with security management and how they handle game ownership. A big part of the conversation is about the irony of it all. Ubisoft has spent years pushing digital ownership and live service models, making it clear they don't want players to truly own their games. And now, they're the ones losing control of their own product. Some are joking that Ubisoft should add a new fetch quest, retrieve all leaked copies and return them to HQ. Others are saying Ubisoft is just getting a taste of their own medicine. After all, they wanted a world where players don't own their games, and now they don't own theirs either. Then there's the debate over online verification. Some people think Ubisoft could have avoided this mess if they had a mandatory online check, something that would have blocked leaked copies from being played early.
Contact PlayStation, and PlayStation could lock down on all of this, and they could just be like, oh, this app, executable, whatever, is not launchable on the PlayStation 5 console, and so if you try to do it, it'll identify it as a stolen copy, your account gets flagged, maybe even terminated for breaking TOS. There's all sorts of stuff that they could theoretically do, but it requires PlayStation to act on it, and there's just so many variables that it's really hard to say whether or not we would ever see something like that happen. But what I can say confidently is, like, if they do have a way of trying to go after these guys that are playing early versions of the games, they will and should probably go after them for stealing copies of games that have not released yet. With this, it's just really, really remarkable because, again, it's not just one copy, it's many all over the world.
But that idea did not go over well. Most players see physical discs as a way to avoid digital restrictions, and needing an internet connection just to play something that's already on the disc, that's a dangerous precedent. The fear is that if publishers use this leak as an excuse to tighten control, it could speed up the industry's move away from physical games entirely. And of course, there are conspiracy theories. Some think the leak might actually be intentional, that maybe Ubisoft is setting up an excuse to blame poor sales on piracy instead of their own mismanagement. Others are convinced Ubisoft is just cursed, that this level of repeated failure has to be sabotaged from the inside. There's also the question of what this means for the game itself. If physical copies were printed before the delay, then do they even have the final round of fixes? Could there be outdated content, unfinished mechanics, even placeholder music still on the disc? Some are already joking that this means Yasuke's hip-hop soundtrack might actually be in the launch version after all. Overall, the reaction is a mix of amusement, frustration, and a sense of inevitability. It's just another chapter in what's becoming an almost comedic series of failures. And at this point, the real question is, what else can possibly go wrong before launch? Now, this isn't the first time a game has leaked early. Far from it. No Man's Sky, for example, had a situation where a single retail copy leaked onto eBay 2 weeks before launch. Some guy bought it for $1,300 just to play it early. But that was one copy. With AC Shadows, we're talking about possibly hundreds, if not thousands of copies floating around worldwide. So what happens now? There's going to be gameplay footage story spoilers, people finishing the game before reviewers even get their copies. It's a total disaster. Ubisoft actually responded pretty quickly. They put out a statement saying they're aware of the situation, that the dev team is still working on final patches, and that any footage people see online isn't representative of the final product. Basically, they're asking fans not to spread spoilers. But let's be real, that's not going to stop anyone. At this point, you have to wonder, how does a game go through this many issues issues in one marketing cycle. We've had controversies, delays, leaks, and now full-on retail copies floating around a month early. It's insane. And yeah, plenty of games have had bad launches, but I can't think of many that had this much bad press before they even came out. So what do you think? Is this just bad luck? Or is Ubisoft completely fumbling the handling of this game? And can you think of another game that had this many problems before launch? Because honestly, I'm struggling to come up with one. The community reaction to Assassin's Creed Shadows has been pretty divided. Some players are excited about the setting and the return of classic assassination mechanics, while others are deeply concerned about enemy AI, spongy combat, and Ubisoft's design choices. There's a clear appreciation for the return of actual assassination moves, something that had been pushed aside in recent entries. Players also like the visual design, with many praising the outfits and the overall atmosphere. Some have noted that the game looks more polished compared to earlier footage, and there's hope that Ubisoft will continue refining things before launch. Stealth fans seem to be cautiously optimistic, especially about Naoe's gameplay, which appears more fluid and traditional compared to Yasuke's heavier combat. The bad. On the flip side, enemy AI is a major concern. Many players are pointing out that guards seem completely oblivious, staring at walls, failing to react to threats, and not noticing when their allies drop dead right next to them. This is especially frustrating for a game that's supposed to have a strong stealth element. Combat is another big sticking point. The biggest complaint? Enemies are straight-up damage sponges, similar to Assassin's Creed Odyssey. People are already worried that if level scaling is enforced, fights could become a tedious slog. Several clips have shown enemies surviving katana strikes straight through the neck, only to backflip away as if nothing happened, something that immediately broke immersion for a lot of fans. And then there's the inevitable Ghost of Tsushima comparison. Ubisoft has been sitting on a feudal Japan Assassin's Creed for years, but now that it's finally here, many are saying it looks like a weaker version of what Sucker Punch already nailed back in 2020. Combat, movement, and AI all seem to fall short in comparison. Some are even saying that seeing Shadows has just made them want to go replay Ghost of Tsushima instead.
Also, can we just take a moment and appreciate this clip? In my opinion, this is the best clip from this entire article because it looks so polished compared to what we saw almost 6 months ago. And if you can't see that this is a lot more polished, then you, my friend, are just simply blind. She's also got the Kusarigama, a weapon proficient in crowd control. It's got an extendable chain and sharp sight, so you can keep enemies at a distance or cut them down up close. It also unlocks the ability to rush assassinate enemies from up to 10 meters away. And then there's thankfully the return of the hidden blade combat, something we have not seen for I believe like 12 years or something insane like that.
Right now, it's a mix of cautious optimism and growing skepticism. Some fans are holding out hope that Ubisoft will polish things up before launch. Others feel like this is just another copy-paste Ubisoft open-world game with the same issues we've been seeing for years. Will Shadows actually deliver a fresh and engaging experience? Or will it just feel like another reskinned Assassin's Creed with all the same problems? That's the big question heading into launch.
The Keeper's Staff.
Pre-sales for Shadows are apparently tracking well-matching Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which was the second best-selling entry in the franchise. Ubisoft's banking on this game to turn things around, and early previews have been positive, especially when it comes to the dual protagonist system and its story. If it delivers, this could be a major win for them. Meanwhile, Rainbow Six Siege is still holding strong, hitting its highest monthly revenue per paying user since launch. The Crew Motorfest is also doing well with more players and better retention than The Crew 2. But here's where things get tricky. Ubisoft has been aggressively cutting costs. They've already shut down studios and laid off hundreds of employees, and they're planning even more restructuring to go beyond their initial cost-cutting targets. And then there's the whole Tencent situation. Ubisoft announced a strategic review last month, and rumors of a buyout by Tencent have been floating around since October. The company isn't confirming anything, but they're clearly keeping their options open. So, what happens next? Can Assassin's Creed Shadows actually pull Ubisoft out of this slump? And if a buyout is on the table, does Tencent end up calling the shots?